So you're thinking about buying a house on Lake Lanier. You're ready to enjoy fun summer days out on the water, picturesque views all year long, while still having great proximity to all the amenities and necessities you are used to. So what is it like buying a house on the lake, and what do you need to know before you make this move? Hi, I'm Sarah Maslowski with KeyPoint Homes Group, a local real estate agent here in the North Metro Atlanta area. And as a resident of Lake Lanier myself, I completely get the appeal of living here. Lake Lanier spreads throughout a total of 5 counties, with majority of it sitting in Hall and Forsyth counties. It has 692 miles of shoreline, and it takes up about 37,000 acres. The south end of the lake is only about 50 miles north of Atlanta, and the north end is about 65 miles from the city, depending upon where you're coming from and where you're going. There are several towns that sit on the lake, so you can choose from smaller towns like Murrayville, Claremont, and Lula, or bigger towns like Gainesville, Cumming, and Dawsonville. The north end of Lake Lanier is a bit more rural and tends to be a bit more affordable since it's not as close to all of the shopping, restaurants, and amenities. The south end is usually pricier and closer to shopping and restaurants. No matter which end of the lake you end up on, it's going to cost you a pretty penny. So what do you need to know about buying a home here on Lake Lanier? One of the first and most important things you need to understand about buying a home on Lake Lanier is that the pricing here works in a completely different way than it does everywhere else in the North Metro. There are a ton of different factors that go into pricing lake homes. You've got the view, walkability to the lake, and whether or not the house has a dock permit are some of the biggest factors that go into coming up with a price. If you want a clear view of the water with a gentle walk to your own dock, it's going to be expensive. One of the most common questions or comments we get is, why doesn't everyone just cut down the trees behind their house so that they can see the lake better and increase the value? Well, it's because it's not allowed. The Army Corps of Engineers owns the lake itself and most of the land right around it. You will occasionally find some homes where their property line goes all the way clear into the water, but more often than not, there is going to be a buffer of core property. This also means that a lot of times the backyard of a home on the lake looks like it's quite large, but most of it is core property, meaning you cannot do anything to it. You can't add a fence, a pool, cut down trees, anything. So since that land cannot be altered, if you are dead set on having a clear view of the water from inside your house, that is going to limit your options. And since that is rare, it means that it's going to be expensive. Now, I don't want to make a blanket statement and say it's not possible to find a home on the lake with a dock for less than $500,000, because technically, well, there are some options. Are they anything that's going to be livable? Not really. You've got this home that is in quite disarray, and the quote-unquote dock isn't even close to being in water at the moment for $350,000. This option is a lot more livable. It definitely needs work, but it does have a nice dock. But all 720 square feet of this home will still run you $550,000. You are going to have to spend closer to $700,000 or $800,000 to find a house with more potential, and even then, don't be surprised if the house still needs updates or renovations. I mentioned earlier how Lake Lanier is controlled by the Army Corps of Engineers, and they also control all the dock permits on the lake. There are a total of 10,615 dock permits on Lake Lanier, and all of these permits have been spoken for, meaning that you do not have the ability to have a dock on the lake unless you already have a permit. This means that you can't just buy a house that's on the lake that doesn't have a permit and apply to get your own. All of the permits that are allowed to be on the lake have already been given out. When we are house hunting, we will need to confirm that a permit is included with the house and can be transferred to you. Another thing to think about is that if a house is permitted for a single slip dock, that is the only kind of dock that you will be able to have. You can't just say, I think I'll put a party dock here or a double slip dock here. You can only replace your dock with whatever size it was already permitted for. Now, sometimes the Army Corps will give exceptions to that, and sometimes you may be able to go larger. But a good rule of thumb is to plan on what is already there. Not every house on the lake comes with its own dock, but there are plenty of communities that have communal docks that are also a popular option for people who want to live on the lake but can't necessarily afford to have a house that has a dock permit. If you aren't really pleased with the quality of houses in your price point, you may want to consider a house in a neighborhood with a community dock. These communities have a limited number of deeded boat slips that are either tied to individual homes or are available for purchase from the HOA. This means that only some homeowners will have a dedicated boat slip in the community dock. Most all of the community docks have a day use slip, which are dedicated for visitors dropping off and picking up guests, or maybe storing your boat at a local marina and drive it over to your community dock to pick up your family and friends. Typically, these slips are only available for a day use and they do not allow for anything long-term storage or overnight. If you don't want to own a boat and have the hassle of keeping up the maintenance of it and the overall cost to own it, but you still like to occasionally rent one for a weekend during the summer when you have family in town, this makes it very easy to do so. Speaking of maintenance, there is a bit of maintenance that comes with having a dock. Docks on Lake Lanier are floating docks, meaning that they move with the water levels and have to be pushed out and pulled in since they don't always have to stay in the same place. Managing the dock is not something that you need to do every day or even every week. Depending upon rainfall, you may have to make adjustments to your dock every couple of weeks. And of course, there are dock management companies that can handle this for you as well. Currently, we are having a pretty dry winter, so lake levels are quite low. Some docks are left sitting on dry land. The depth of water that your dock is on is definitely something you want to be cognizant of when purchasing a home on the lake. Now, something that goes hand in hand with lake levels is something that I often question about, and that is flooding on Lake Lanier. Good news, since the Army Corps controls the lake levels, it will not flood because they can release water to lower these levels. Now, another thing to know when preparing for your home search on Lake Lanier is that homes can be quite quirky. You will find a lot of homes that were built right after the creation of the lake back in 1956, and also the land around the lake is not very flat. Sometimes houses can be precariously positioned and have steep, winding driveways, and then another steep walk down from the house to get to the actual water. A lot of these houses are either original or have been modified over the years and have a touch of the 80s thrown in, or maybe they were fully remodeled in the early 2000s. It's not uncommon to just find some really odd layouts and designs on the lake that you would not find here locally anywhere else. Now, like we talked about earlier, you cannot do anything on core property, so you have to be conscious of this if you plan on doing any remodeling or rebuilding. People will buy an old lake house and essentially bulldoze it and build in the same place. But you can't just come in and tear down a tiny house and build a huge mega mansion unless the lot size will accommodate it. You should also keep in mind that there is a lot for sale on the lake that has not yet been developed on. It's probably for a good reason. If no one has come through in the last 70 years and tried to build on it, it's probably a sign that it's either going to be extremely expensive to accomplish or the lot just doesn't really support a home. You also have to keep in mind that houses on the lake are going to be on septic tanks. So you have to factor this in where this is located or where it would be located, especially if you're considering putting in a pool. So what do you think? There is a lot to know when it comes to buying a lake house, right? That's why I make these videos, and if you're thinking about buying a home here on Lake Lanier or anywhere in Georgia for that matter, I want to be your real estate agent. You need someone who knows all the ins and outs of these homes, and that's exactly what I'm here for. You can find my contact information below this video, and make sure you subscribe to my newsletter in order to stay up to date on all things happening here in Georgia. Watch this video next if you're thinking about buying a lake home.